Chapter 1360. Marooned. A grim silence settled over the open platform. Even the deaf guards seemed affected by it, shifting uncomfortably and throwing worried glances at Cassie. Knowing what he knew now, Sonny recognized the complicated emotions reflected in their eyes: love, devotion, loyalty, but also wariness and fear. He sighed, then took a bite out of a succulent fruit and leaned back. "So, you guessed who the 6 plagues are too?" Of course she did. Cassie always knew more than them, even if she kept it to herself. The blind girl nodded slowly. "I did who they are, but not how they are. The great river is a strange place. Many things that should not be possible anywhere else are possible here." She frowned. The 6 plagues, I had to learn a lot about them, since they are the main threat to fallen grace. It was hard not to draw conclusions in the process. Strangely enough, though, none of them participated in the attacks on the city during the year I've spent here. Nephi's looked at her somberly. "Were you serious about what you said? That torment might be responsible for us coming here." Cassie hesitated for a few moments, then shook her head. "Not really. She strikes me as someone far too wild and damaged to come up with such an intricate scheme. She's dangerous, though. After the Dread Lord, she has to be the most dangerous of the plagues, simply because of her foresight." So there was no answer after all. Sonny was still unable to learn who it was that had been manipulating the nightmare, unseen, showing terrifying knowledge of fate and the future. There was another problem facing them currently, though. Not good. Meeting Dusk might have turned out entirely differently from how Sonny and Nephi's had imagined it, but their overall goal remained the same. They had to conquer the nightmare, but first, they had to find the members of the cohort. Their last theory was that each challenger except for Nephi's had been sent into the body of a powerful defiled champion, who might or might not have been the future version of themselves. Regardless of the true identity of the 6 plagues, that theory had been proven wrong now. After all, Cassie was right here in front of them, in place of the last Sibyl, Dusk, not Torment. Which meant that they had no idea where the other members were. And since it had already been a year since the nightmare started, Sonny felt intense worry gnaw at his heart. No, don't think about it." Looking at Cassie, he hesitated for a while, then composed himself and asked, "You said you knew that we would arrive eventually." The blind girl nodded. "Yes, I saw us meeting in a vision, or rather felt it." Sonny took a deep breath. "Then what about the others? Do you know where they are?" There was one more question that he had, but couldn't bring himself to ask. "Are they alive?" Cassie suddenly smiled. The melancholy shrouding her features was vanquished, her face illuminated by that smile. "Yes, of course." She froze, then coughed awkwardly. "They're alive, I mean sorry." "Right, I should remember who I'm talking to." The blind girl was more than capable of answering questions that had not been asked yet. Her smile dimmed a little, and Cassie sighed. "I haven't wasted the whole year doing nothing, you know. Apart from making sure that fallen grace is not conquered by the defilement, I also tried to learn as much as I could. About the world, the tomb. I also tried to find the others, of course." Nephi's leaned forward, a hint of excitement in her eyes. "And?" The blind girl hesitated. "I managed to determine their locations. Effie and Jet are together. Here it is." Suddenly, a small shadow fell on the platform, and a familiar crow landed on Cassie's shoulder. It stared at Sonny with an aggrieved expression, and then cawed loudly. Sonny. It was Jet's crow echo. Staring at the bird with excitement, he asked, "They're here in fallen grace." The crow suddenly looked crestfallen. It shook its beak slightly, then cawed sadly. Stug. Both Sonny and Nephi's looked at Cassie, worry apparent in their eyes. She sighed. "They are alive and together, but they are caught in a dangerous zone of the Great River, unable to escape. I spent a lot of time trying to locate the exact coordinates of where they are marooned, but only succeeded after this echo found me. I would have tried to rescue them myself, but I am, the only outsider left in fallen grace. I couldn't leave before you arrived. Sonny nodded, both relieved and concerned. It was good that Effie and Jet were together, and it was even better that Cassie had determined their exact location. The existence of the Crow Echo also proved that at least one of them was still alive. And yet, how could he not worry when he had just learned that they were stuck in some bizarre, hazardous zone of the Great River? Nephi's inhaled deeply, then asked, "What about Kai and Mordred, Anvil's son?" The blind girl frowned. "They are also together. However, their situation is worse." She lingered for a few moments and said darkly, "They are in Twilight." Sonny and Nephi's glanced at each other, confused. He suppressed the impulse to touch the crown of Twilight and asked, "Twilight, the city of the Serpent King, wasn't it destroyed?" Cassie remained silent for a while. Eventually, she shrugged with uncertainty. "It is lost, but it is not destroyed. The legends say that it was devoured by time. I am not sure what it means. In fact, I am not sure about anything that has to do with King Daron and his people." Sonny raised an eyebrow. "Oh, why is that?" A deep frown appeared on the blind girl's face. She pursed her lips, then said hesitantly, "Everything about them is odd. They were not riverborn, but they weren't refugees from the dream realm either. They appeared within the tomb much later than the Sibyls and the Seekers, when the river people civilization had already been established and the defilement had already spread." Cassie lingered for a bit and then added, "If not for the fact that they simply can't be from Earth, I would have said that they were challengers just like us, each and every one of them. Challengers just like us, each and every one of them." Sonny remained silent for a while, a complicated expression on his face. He was remembering the very beginning of the nightmare and the strange words the spell had spoken. 13,700,077 brave ones, welcome to the nightmare. Back then, he had been understandably stunned and confused. There was no explanation for that number, considering that there were not even 1,000,000 awakened in the waking world. The start of the nightmare had been abnormal in more than one way, though, and so he tentatively attributed these words to an error made by the spell. However, Sonny had never been truly convinced that the spell was even capable of being mistaken. So, what if it had been correct? He slowly exhaled. "They are." Cassie turned her head slightly, confused. "How can it be?" Sonny lingered for a few moments, then shrugged. "I'm not sure, but I know for a fact that the people of Twilight were challengers. It is because we've met King Daron, Nephi's and I. It was written in the description of the crown of Twilight. Thus, the valiant king became a guide who guarded his people in their nightmares. That had been Daron's entire plan, to enter the tomb of Ariel so that a phantom of him would be conjured by the spell to guide his people when they challenged the nightmare. It had already seemed strange when Sonny first read the runes. However, back then, he had not met Anik yet, and therefore, had not learned that there were no nightmares in the ancient past of the dream realm. So where had the Serpent King and his people come from? "You've met the Serpent King." Cassie's voice trembled a little. Sonny and Nephi's glanced at each other, and then briefly described their long journey into the past. With each sentence Sonny spoke, the story sounded more and more implausible. Great nightmare creatures, furious storms of broken time, ghost ships that appeared out of nowhere just when they were needed. It was very much like the fairy tale of astonishing adventures that Anik had told him. And yet, it was all true, of course, because Sonny was the one telling it. And so, we repaired the ship as best we could and set sail in search of fallen grace. There were many battles on the way, but as you can see, we are both in one piece. He paused for a moment and then added somberly, "None of the nightmare creatures we faced was as terrible as the azure serpent had been, though, as Daron of the Twilight Sea had been." Cassie frowned. "I've heard that Twilight had its own culture and was an independent city, not at all similar to the ones established by the Sybils. I also heard that they were tremendously powerful and even laid siege to Verge at one point, which ended in disaster. Many of the Twilight people were outsiders, maybe even all of them. But challengers, where could they have come from?" Sonny slumped in his chair, thinking. Eventually, he said with doubt, Maybe they came from the future of the waking world. Either that, or they were the last remnants of the Dream Realm humans, from the time of extinction after the Doom War had ended. Seeds of nightmares should have first appeared sometime between when the Sybils entered the tomb and when the spell infected our world. So maybe Daron ruled then, during the twilight of human civilization in the aftermath of the war. Wasn't that also what the description of the Crown of Twilight said? There was a king who ruled over a dying land. Nephi sighed. "It is strange, though. If these people were indeed challengers, they would have entered the nightmare by taking someone's place. Were there 13 million humans inhabiting the Great River, even? I doubt it." She lingered for a few moments, then added somberly, "There is one thing that concerns me much more, though. Cassie, you said that Twilight was not destroyed but lost, devoured by time. None of us knows what it means exactly, but we do know that the Serpent King at least managed to escape. He was a demented beast when we met him, his soul consumed by corruption. So, will we find millions of powerful nightmare creatures when we reach Twilight? Is that lost city an even bigger threat than Verge?" Sonny suddenly felt cold. As he considered her dreadful words, Cassie said in a cautious tone, "There is such a possibility. The inhabitants of Twilight can also be long dead. Lastly, there is also a possibility that we will find millions of powerful awakened warriors, not abominations, when we reach Twilight." He blinked. "She's right. Twilight could turn out to be a dire threat, but it could also be hiding an army of allies they sorely needed to destroy Verge and conquer the nightmare. There was no point in guessing, either way." Sonny sighed. "We'll find out when we get there. And we do need to get there. We can't leave Kai behind. We also need Mordred and his power to take on Verge, and his knowledge to eliminate the Soul Stealer." He looked at Nephi's, then at Cassie. "There are no objections, right?" Nephi shook her head. "Our goal remains the same. Gather the cohort and eliminate the first Seeker, who is far downstream in the city of Verge, under the protection of the 6 plagues." She frowned slightly. "Although the task does seem too perilous, there has to be a way to accomplish it, or the spell wouldn't have sent us here. So, we must be lacking some key piece of information or an important advantage still. Twilight might very well be the place where that secret is hidden." Sonny nodded. "So we're in agreement then. Let's go fetch Effie and Jet first, then sail to Twilight to retrieve Kai and Mordred. When everyone is gathered and we had learned everything there is to learn, we'll attack Verge." Cassie remained silent for a few moments, then said quietly, "I agree. However, we must not forget one crucial detail." Her beautiful face turned solemn. "I doubt that the 6 plagues will just remain idle and allow us to gather forces. If they are truly the future versions of ourselves, they must already know what our next steps will be. It would be easy for them to try and stop us." Sonny didn't even want to think about the paradoxical mess of having his future defiled self hunting him down. However, he wasn't opposed to it. Imagining the vile, scarred face of the Mad Prince, he grinned darkly. "Let them come. I would love to meet the bastards, too." Sometime later, the 3 of them were walking across the pier, followed by an excited crowd. The 2 guards were not far behind either. They never left Cassie's side. The golden chain was ringing softly with each step she took. The elderly citizens of fallen grace were overflowing with joy at the sight of their young and beautiful priestess, though seemingly oblivious to the ominous meaning behind the golden shackles. The news of the arrival of two outsiders had spread throughout the city as well. The mood was festive. Sonny studied their faces through the shadows, then turned to Cassie and said silently, "You seem to be very popular. They absolutely adore you." A faint smile appeared on her face. "It's Dusk, not me. And how could they not? She was a wise and benevolent ruler, not to mention a champion of the city. It was because of the Sibyls that the river people could defend themselves against the defilement. Most importantly, I am both the most powerful awakened and the only outsider left in fallen grace. If they lose their faith in me and their love for me, then all they'll have left will be despair." She let out a wistful sigh. "They only love me because they have no other choice." Sonny remained silent for a few moments, somewhat stunned by how cynical that statement sounded. It bothered him a great deal for some reason. Then he shook his head. "Still, you must have done a lot to earn their trust. Surviving a year in the third nightmare could not have been easy, especially alone." He had already seen fallen grace and its people. They were not the kind of force he had hoped to find. And while Cassie had not gone into detail when describing her attempts to defend the city against the attacking defiled, it was easy to surmise that protecting it was more of a burden than a boon. Her days must have been filled with countless battles and narrow victories. It was a miracle that fallen grace still stood. She smiled. "Ah, well, yes. After the initial chaos, I led the remaining warriors into battle many times and killed many abominations. It was indeed not easy, but I wasn't really alone." Cassie gestured to the crowd following them at a respectful distance, as well as at the two silent guards. "The people of fallen grace might have grown weak, but they are valiant and brave. I also had several echoes to assist me." "Right." Neff had once brought back a powerful echo from the Nightmare Desert, a fallen demon with 6 arms. That echo had been given to one of the Fire Keepers before his cohorts challenged a seed of nightmare. She would have arranged for a powerful bodyguard or two for Cassie as well. Sonny tilted his head. "How strong are your echoes exactly?" The blind girl remained silent for a moment. "You already know the quiet dancer. Her power is augmented by a special memory I received from Valor, albeit not by much. There is also an artificial echo Neff procured for me from the clan, as well, equal in power to a fallen monster. And there is an echo I earned here in the tomb of Ariel myself, a transcendent beast of sorts." He raised an eyebrow. "Of sorts?" Cassie let out a quiet sigh. "It's the echo of the senior Sibyl I killed. I try not to summon her where the citizens of fallen grace can see." Sonny flinched a little. After a few moments of silence, Nephi suddenly spoke, her voice even. "You alone should be enough to deal with 2 masters. With a transcendent echo, those guards of yours stand no chance whatsoever. What is the point of them following you around?" Cassie smiled sadly. "Yes, there's no real point. I can easily kill them and I can easily break out of these chains. They know it perfectly well, but they are loyal and devoted to their duty, and so I remain in chains out of respect for their devotion. Isn't it sad? The fact that I am only guarded by 2 masters should tell you everything you need to know about how desperate fallen Grace's situation is. Unless we act, it will be swallowed by the defilement soon enough." Sonny sighed, trying to imagine what had happened to the real fallen Grace and real Dusk. He knew that the last Sibyl had been buried at sea, her body eventually becoming the vessel of a corrupted terror. The existence of the terror of Low 49 was proof that the civilization of the Great River had met a sorrowful end. And it would meet it again if they failed to conquer the nightmare. Just then, they reached the end of the pier and walked across a wooden plank to the deck of the ghostly ship. The crowd stayed back, with only the two guards following them aboard the ancient vessel. Cassie froze, lowering her hands and staring into nothingness with her beautiful blue eyes. After a while, she said softly, "Sonny, can you look at the sacred tree?" He did as he was told, belatedly realizing that the blind girl must have used her ascended ability to share his perception. Although he didn't feel anything, it also felt strangely violating. There was no harm done, but for someone as secretive as Sonny, sharing was an uncomfortable process. "I wonder if she sees the bastard." He threw a furtive glance at the Sin of Solace, who stood motionlessly below the tree, and suppressed his discomfort. They walked around the ship for a while, allowing Cassie to study both its exterior and interior. She was the person who knew the true chain breaker best, after all, so they needed her judgment to rid themselves of doubt. Eventually, the blind girl stopped near the sacred tree and gently placed her palm on the white bark. After a few moments of silence, she sighed and turned to them. "It's the chain breaker, I am certain." Sonny and Nephi's grew somber. They had suspected as much, of course, but still, a slight hope that it was merely a similar vessel still lived in their hearts. Now it was utterly extinguished. Cassie pointed here and there, describing her findings. "The essence channels are severely damaged, but their shape is unmistakable. I repaired them myself once, after all, so I know every small detail of how Noctis had carved new enchantments into the older ones created by the fire hunters. It's his ship, our ship. There are many differences, but the core is the same." Sonny grimaced. "But how the hell can it be here, and how did we end up finding it?" The blind girl hesitated, then somberly shook her head. "That I cannot answer." He closed his eyes, then rubbed his face tiredly. "What the hell is going on? What the hell has been going on from the start of this damned nightmare? There are too many unexplainable things." Sonny's tolerance for mysteries was at its limits. Cassie lingered for a few moments, then suddenly spoke. "I can tell you one thing, though." Both Sonny and Nephi's looked at her, waiting. She pointed to the deck below her feet and smiled. "I think I can repair the enchantments again. If you give me some time, the chain breaker will be able to fly once more." News that the chain breaker could be restored to its former future. Glory was a welcome one. However, it was going to take time for Cassie to repair it. They were also going to need a lot of materials, as well as plenty of help from the locals of Fallen Grace. There were experienced shipbuilders among them. Sonny and Nephi's had only patched up the ancient vessel well enough for it to not sink immediately, but there were a lot of things they weren't able to achieve. Now, the situation was different. Just repairing the hull and the decks was going to take a few weeks. After that part was done, more intricate work would start. Cassie was going to have to restore the runic pathways that made the enchantments of the flying ship work. That sounded like a lot of time. Sonny and Nephi's knew that an entire year had already passed within the tomb of Ariel since the start of the nightmare, and yet they felt uneasy wasting even a single day. The members of the cohort were somewhere out there. After all, their situations unknown. Perhaps they were in desperate need of help. In the end, the three of them decided not to postpone their departure too much. Sonny and Nephi's needed to rest, and the chain breaker had to receive urgent repairs. But since Cassie would be able to work on the enchantments alone, they were going to leave Fallen Grace as soon as the work on the damaged portions of the hull was finished, which left them with maybe 2 weeks of peaceful time to recover and prepare themselves. Looking at the crimson blaze of dusk from the window of Cassie's private chambers, Sonny sighed. The sky was a painting of beautiful red, and the great river was like a sea of burning blood. The city below them was like a snow flower. "Are you going to be all right, leaving Fallen Grace behind?" Turning away from the window, he looked at the blind girl. She was brewing tea, seemingly not at all inconvenienced by her golden shackles. Nephi's was nearby too, studying the murals on the wall. Cassie softly shook her head. I did get attached to these people, but what we are doing is for their sake as well. If we don't strike at Verge, there is no future left for the river people. In a few years or decades at most, they will be gone. If they were the real river people, of course. As far as humans of the waking world knew, the world of the nightmare would cease to exist as soon as the seed was conquered. But it was hard to make the distinction. Sonny had never been able to, at least. He walked over to the table and sat down. Do they understand that? Will they let you go? The two guards were standing just outside the door. Even though he could not see them, he could feel their shadows. Cassie lingered for a few moments, pouring the tea into beautiful ceramic cups. They will, I'll explain it well, don't worry. Come, let's have some tea. Nephise pulled her attention away from the murals and joined them at the table. Her face was calm and composed. Raising her cup, she hesitated for a bit, then said in an even tone, I haven't had a chance to say it, but I missed you too, and I'm glad that we found each other too. She looked at Cassie, then at Sonny. Her gaze lingered on his face for a few extra moments. Then Nephise took a sip of the fragrant amber liquid and smiled faintly. It's like the good old times. Sonny was considering saying something heartfelt as well, but then surrendered to the embarrassment of showing his true feelings and pretended to choke on his tea instead. Good? Which times exactly are you calling good? The time when I got skewered by a carapace centurion, or when that damn tree mesmerized us, or when we were attacked by that depth dweller while crossing the dark sea at night. Nephise remained silent for a few moments, then nodded. Oh, yes. He stared. If that's her idea of a good time, I'll be damned, that actually explains a lot. Sonny felt sorry for the guy who would take Changing Star on a date one day. As he did, the Sin of Solace laughed derisively. Self-pity, huh? Shut the hell up. He threw an angry glance at the sword wraith, then shook his head. Who was he kidding? Sonny had felt nostalgic about the simple days of surviving on the Forgotten Shore many times. The hell of it had also been like a dark paradise for him. Looking through a shadow, he studied the three of them, Nephise, Cassie, and himself. Gods. Each one of them had changed so much. They were practically unrecognizable, and it wasn't even because of how much their appearance had been transformed by the awakening and the ascension. Back then, Sonny had been a powerless street rat who only cared about himself and how to keep his secret. Cassie had been a sweet but helpless girl, broken by the severity of her crippling flaw. Nephise had been an isolated young woman who didn't know much about the world, except for the fact that she was going to burn it to the ground. Look at us now. The scrawny kid from the outskirts was gone, replaced by a fair young man with eyes so cold and dark that it was easy to cut yourself on their chilling gaze. The helpless girl was now a beautiful young woman whose softness concealed unwavering will and ominous power. Nephise had changed the most, perhaps, learning too many bitter lessons. Their names were known across the world, and they had long lost count of all the powerful abominations cut down by their blades. Fallen, corrupted, even great. Devils, terrors, even titans. There had been humans too, awakened masters and even saints. Who would have thought that three teenagers that had met in the Crimson Labyrinth would be drinking tea in a hidden world created by a demon one day, resting before setting sail to wage war on an entire city of nightmare creatures? Sonny took a sip of his tea and shook his head. Life is sure funny sometimes. Still, it was damn good tea. He hesitated for a while and then said awkwardly, I might have missed you too. I'm glad that the three of us are once again together. Great River flowed endlessly. Somewhere in the future, the ruins of Weave drifted empty and silent, with no one left to witness their inevitable march toward destruction. Somewhere in the past, the city of Verge stood, harboring the hidden horrors of the defilement. There was twilight, too, mysterious and dreadful, lost to time. But here in Fallen Grace, the days were peaceful. The work on the chain breaker started soon after Sonny, Nephi's, and Cassie finished their tea. He visited the piers to observe the repairs, but there was really no point. The elderly citizens of the last human city knew how to tend to a ship much better than he did, and even though their bodies were ancient and frail, there were still some awakened among them. Their physical strength solved many problems, so Sonny did not need to help. The best he could do was not get in the way. Knowing that there were many battles ahead, he dedicated his time to preparing as thoroughly as possible. Cassie and Nephi's were doing the same. The latter was practicing her swordsmanship without rest, while the former, actually, Sonny was not entirely sure what their blind oracle was doing. She spent a lot of time arranging measures to keep Fallen Grace safe in her absence, but also made a point of sparing as much of it as possible for him and Nephi's. They had meals together, toured the city, and held long strategy meetings. He was happy because the three of them were together again. But it was also a bit strange. Cassie had spent an entire year in the nightmare, which meant that she was older than Sonny by a few months now, making him the youngest in the cohort. He had treated her as a little sister once, at the start of it all, so it felt odd to suddenly be the one who was younger. But then again, age was such an abstract thing, especially so for the awakened. Sonny himself had spent an unknown length of time in the dream prison created by Nightmare. Even though he had forgotten most of that cruel trial, his soul still remembered its scars. Speaking of Nightmare, the Dark Destrier was his main priority for now. Sonny had been unsure that he would be able to create enough memories to help his steed ascend before departure from Fallen Grace, but he was pleasantly surprised to have been mistaken. There were two main reasons for that. The first one was that Cassie had opened the treasury of the temple to supply him with the few soul shards he lacked. The second one was the Crown of Twilight. Its legacy of twilight, enchantment greatly enhanced the rate with which Sonny regenerated essence at dawn and dusk. Here in Fallen Grace, though, dusk lasted for nearly the entire day, interrupted only by a brief and fleeting night. As a result, his reserves of essence had become nearly inexhaustible. Which was a good thing for more than one reason. The three of them were destined to visit the lost city of the Serpent King, after all. Twilight was situated at the opposite edge of the great river, where it was almost always dawn. Sonny was certain that having a boundless amount of essence at his disposal would come in handy, no matter what dangers they were going to face there. For now, he concentrated on weaving memories to feed Nightmare above all else. The counter of shadow fragments was rising with each day. So was the counter of nightmares the tenebrous steed had subjugated, at a speed much greater than ever before. Maybe because of the nature of the tomb of Ariel, but much more importantly, because of the river people. In the waking world, his shadow had very few ways of collecting nightmares. It was because the dreams of mundane humans were powerless, while awakened never dreamed. It was only masters and abominations that could supply his shadow with suitable dreams to subjugate. But awakened of the dream realm, and therefore, the river people of the tomb of Ariel, were different from those infected by the spell. Their souls did not travel between worlds when they slept, and so, Nightmare could invade their dreams and conquer their fears. As a result, the citizens of Fallen Grace enjoyed strangely blissful sleep during these days, while his shadow received plenty of nightmares to add to his swarm. At this rate, Sonny did not know what would happen first, the Black Steed's ascension or return to full power as a terror. He worked tirelessly to weave more rudimentary memories, and do it faster. One after another, they were completed. And then finally, Sonny weaved the last of them. The date of their departure was already drawing near when he did. Hidden in the spacious chambers Cassie had arranged for him within the temple, Sonny slowly dismissed his 4 shadow arms and put Weaver's needle down. Left in his human hand was a beautiful nacre ornament. What made it look so tantalizing was not the colorful sheen, though, but the ethereal weave hiding behind it. "It's done." Sonny exhaled slowly, then dismissed the ornament and stretched. "I did it." He felt both tired and exhilarated. Nightmare only needed one more transcendent memory to reach ascension, and now that memory was complete. Standing up, Sonny looked at the crimson sky beyond the window. The night had already passed, which meant that his shadow should have returned to its post. These days, the black steed was usually hiding in the shadows near where the chain breaker was being repaired, guarding the workers on his orders. "I better go visit him right now, then." As Sonny contemplated how much stronger Nightmare would become as an ascended terror, a swift shadow fell from the sky and landed on the windowsill. It was Jet's crow. The small bird jumped a couple of times, then stared at him angrily and cawed. "Stuck, stuck." He sighed. "I know, Crow, Crow. We'll go get your master soon. Hey, I want to see her too. Just wait for a few more days." The echo had been hanging around him a lot, perhaps out of familiarity. Whenever Sonny was tired from weaving, he would study the small avian creature and try to appease its impatience. Suddenly, a smile appeared on his lips. "But first, do you want to come find Nightmare with me?" The bird tilted its head and stared at him with its round eyes. Then, it opened its beak and cawed. "Horse, horse." Sonny chuckled. "Yes, the horse, come on. Let's try it again." With that, he dissolved into darkness and manifested himself back into tangible form. This time, Sonny did not recreate his own appearance, instead shaping himself into an entirely different and smaller creature. A few moments later, two crows, one black, the other even darker, as if made of shadows, flew into the crimson sky. Sonny was flying through the crimson sky above fallen Grace. His black feathers were moving slightly in the wind, and his wings rose and fell with a relaxed cadence. His flight was somewhat awkward, but he did not plummet to the ground, at least, like the previous time. He had, of course, assumed the form of a crow. After mastering the fourth step of shadow dance, learning a new form had become much easier for him. So, he had spent the last 2 weeks doing just that, teaching himself how to become a crow. Sonny was already confident on land and had the sea serpent form to protect himself in the water. Only the skis were left unconquered. Granted, he was not going to win a battle as a small bird, but he had to start somewhere. The idea of trying to assume the form of Jet's echo had entered his mind when he was resting after a long and tedious bout of weaving. Yes, Sonny had plenty of essence and more than enough soul shards to accomplish his goal, but even his patience was not limitless. He needed to take a break from time to time and distract himself from the rote process of creating rudimentary memories. During one such break, the persistent crow visited him once again to caw about how Jet was stuck. Staring at it, Sonny remembered that he had not yet made use of his improved ability to shadow various creatures better. The desire to fly across the vast sky stirred in his heart. Who said that only Kai was allowed to zip around in the air? So that was exactly what he had done. Staring at the talkative bird, he tried to teach himself its form, which ended up being just as hard to achieve as turning himself into a giant sea serpent. The body of the crow itself was much smaller and simpler. The problem was that Crow Crow was an echo and thus not truly alive. So, Sonny met an unexpected obstacle. Shadow dance was not that effective against things that weren't alive. In hindsight, he should have known that it would be like that. Thinking back to how he created the form of the onyx serpent, and even further into the past, to the days of learning battle styles from his adversaries, Sonny realized that there were two components to shadow dance. One was purely physical, the other was much deeper and more fundamental, concerning the essence of a being. Its mind, its spirit, its very soul. Echoes did not really possess any of these things, so he was left stumped for a while. In the end, though, Sonny still managed to turn himself into a copy of the crow. It had just taken him much more time and effort than he would have expected, and he did not stop having trouble with the new form after mastering it. Possessing the body of a bird was one thing, but actually moving like a bird was an entirely different issue. Since Sonny had never flown without the help of enchantments before, he had to learn everything from scratch. The first time he turned into a crow, he proceeded to fall on his beak after the simplest hop, a few dozen times in a row, all under the perplexed gaze of the befuddled echo. Nevertheless, he was flying right now. It was a rather exhilarating feeling. It was so exhilarating, in fact, that Sonny opened his beak and cawed. Fly, fly. Then, he got embarrassed and almost lost control of his wings. Now, why the hell did I say it twice? Shaking his head slightly, Sonny looked at the dry dock where the chain breaker stood, being repaired by a large number of craftsmen, and cautiously descended toward it. He did not fall until the last second. Jet's Echo landed with natural ease and hopped a couple of times in excitement, but Sonny gracelessly sprawled on the cobblestones after rolling a couple of times. Ouch, there's still room for improvement. Sighing internally, he let the form of the crow dissolve into a formless shadow, then emerged from it as his human self. Being a human felt cumbersome and boring, but he was also slightly shocked by the ferocious strength hiding in his slender, pale body. Damn, I've only been a crow for a minute. Looking around, Sonny tried to find the shadow in which Nightmare was hiding. He did not notice his steed immediately, but he did notice a familiar old man staring at him with an open mouth. Lord Sunless. Sonny sighed internally. Oh, hey there, Kronos. The elderly teenager had been following them around when they toured the city, full of endless curiosity. He was a nice kid, no matter how hard it was to call a man who looked as old as Professor Obel a kid. But if there was one thing Sonny had an allergy to, it was curious people. So, he felt uncomfortable around the wrinkly river-born youth. Did you turn into a bird? Sonny stared at Kronos for a moment, then shrugged. Yes, in a manner of speaking, I did. The old man stared at him with amazement. Ah, I see. It's like that time you turned into the river serpent. Is that your aspect ability? Sonny took a deep breath. Questions. He had to remind himself how sad the kid's situation was. Not even because Kronos had turned into an old man before becoming an adult, but because he was starved for excitement and interesting things. His whole life was limited to a city that would have been considered tiny in the waking world. And worse than that, that city was the last one there was, with not even news of distant events ever reaching it. Of course, he was endlessly excited by the two unexpected visitors. Sonny remained silent for a moment. To be precise, it's the result of combining all my aspect abilities to create a kind of battle art. Kronos nodded a couple of times, showing that he understood, and said thoughtfully, Oh, I have no idea what you mean, Lord Sunless. Then he smiled. Are you here to check on your ship? The crow Echo looked at the young man with disdain and flapped its wings impatiently. Horse. Sonny nodded. No, I'm here to feed my horse. Crow hopped on Sonny's shoulder, and they headed toward where Nightmare was hiding. Kronos, annoyingly, followed them with an excited smile. That said, Sonny couldn't remain annoyed for long because of the worshipful gaze the old man was giving him. Lord Sunless, if I may ask. He rolled his eyes and sighed. What? Kronos hesitated for a moment. What is a horse? That almost caused Sonny to stumble. What the hell? Why does it sound like something I would say? He shrugged. It's a large animal that runs really well. People used to ride them to get around. Of course, my horse is no ordinary horse. He's a real menace, that beast. The old man frowned in contemplation. But why wouldn't they just use a boat? Sonny suppressed the desire to grind his teeth and answered in an even tone. The world outside the tomb is not all water, remember. Most people live on land. Horses are land animals. Kronos looked into the distance, confusion written all over his face. Ah, I see, I see. Are there no land boats? That seems strange. The barrage of questions continued. By the time they reached the deep shadows where Nightmare was hiding, Sonny felt a bit tired. Yes, Earth does sometimes shake, spew fire, and swallow entire towns. Not too often, though. Mostly when a volcano erupts. Oh, a volcano is just a fire-breathing mountain. And a mountain is basically a big sharp rock, tall enough to reach the clouds. There's ice and snow on top, but not enough air to breathe well. Rather, there's plenty of air, but you can't breathe it without dying. The old man's eyes grew wide. How bizarre. I would never want to live on land. It sounds terrifying. Sonny stared at him wildly. What the hell do you mean, terrifying? You live on an endless river that falls into a bottomless abyss, plagued by roving time storms and defiled monsters from the future. He shook his head, then said in a stifled voice, Nightmare, come out. Two scarlet flames ignited in the darkness, and the shadows surged, forming into the shape of a dreadful black steed. Light glistened on Nightmare's steel fangs and sharp horns, tinted red by the blazing sunset. Kronos yelped. Ah, ate a horse. His wrinkly face grew pale, and he took a couple steps back. My lord, you didn't tell me that horses are such terrifying beasts. Do land dwellers really ride them? Sonny looked at the youth vindictively, then felt bad about it. The kid was very old, after all. What if seeing Nightmare gave him a heart attack? He hesitated for a moment, then patted Kronos on the shoulder. Yes, but as I said, Nightmare is not your usual horse. He is an ancient shadow creature that used to serve an immortal transcendent before becoming mine. Now, let's feed him. As Sonny threw an excited glance at the black steed and summoned the nacre ornament, the old man asked in a shaking voice, But what does this dreadful beast even eat? You don't seem to have any meat with you. Consumed by thoughts of Nightmare's ascension, Sonny smiled absent-mindedly. Oh, don't worry. I have what I need to satiate his hunger right here with me. Surprised that Kronos suddenly took a few more steps back, he gave the old man a strange look and offered the ornament to the dark destrier. Here, buddy, sorry it took me so long. Nightmare snorted quietly, then brought his snout to his hand and pushed it, throwing the memory to the ground. Then he crushed it with one strike of his adamantine hoof. A whirlwind of sparks rose from the crushed ornament and separated into 6 streams, each flowing into one of the dark embers burning within the shadow that served Nightmare as a soul. Here we go, finally. Sonny had always been preoccupied with raising the power of Saint, his primary battle shadow, as much as possible, so he had neglected the black steed a little. It was not without a reason, of course. Nightmare's main purpose was not to be a destructive force in combat. He was a loyal steed first and a fighter second. The utility he offered Sonny was much more valuable than an additional combatant would be. Still, this moment had been a long time coming. As the streams of sparks were absorbed into the darkness hiding inside Nightmare, his silhouette suddenly grew vague. Then, the destrier disappeared. Already expecting that to happen, Sonny dove into his soul sea. Appearing in the lightless silence, he saw his shadow standing on the surface of the still water. Nightmare had lowered his head, his body trembling slightly. Yes. Within the shadow, the glow of the 6 dim embers was growing more and more intense. The water suddenly surged, as if assaulted by an invisible wind. Wisps of black flame rose from Nightmare's sable coat, soon shrouding his figure completely. Sonny had already seen a shadow rise to a new rank several times. He knew that the transformation would not take long. Unlike evolving to a new class, this change was only going to take several minutes. He waited patiently, as if feeling the importance of what was happening somewhere near, but away from their eyes. Both Crow and Kronos remained silent. Soon the transformation was over. The restless waters grew still once again, and the black flames receded. Nightmare was revealed from within their veil, as fearsome as ever. His outward appearance did not change much. Only the red glow of his ferocious eyes seemed brighter. Despite that, his tenebrous silhouette brimmed with a new kind of power. Sunny grinned, an ascended terror. His steed was as powerful as the creature that Nephis had slain at the top of the Crimson Spire now. In fact, even Sunny, who possessed an extremely high level of mental resistance, felt a hint of dread grasping his heart when looking at the dark destrier. Wait, doesn't his aura of fear seem too strong? Trying to suppress his excitement, Sunny forced himself to continue looking at Nightmare and summoned the runes. In the next moment, his expression changed. When did this happen? The counter of the shadow fragments had been filled and emptied. Sunny knew that, of course. However, what he had not expected to see was that the counter of subjugated nightmares had been filled as well. The dream curse, Nightmare's terror ability, was unlocked. Standing near Sunny, Kronos and the Crow Echo exchanged a confused look. Why did Lord Sunless seem so excited? The small bird tilted its head knowingly and cawed with a sense of superiority. Hoarse, the runes shimmered in the darkness, surrounded by still silence. Hypnotized by them, Sunny read greedily. Shadow Nightmare. Shadow rank ascended. Shadow class terror. Shadow fragments 0/300. He had known what to expect, but seeing the word ascended still filled him with excitement. At any other time, Sunny would have lingered, enjoying the view of the changed runes, but he was much more interested in something else right now. His gaze slid lower. Shadow description. This beautiful steed was tamed by the treacherous lost from light in the depths of a harrowing dream. The two shadows battled across countless nightmares, shattering them all apart. Neither was willing to give up, so in the end, the nightmares did. Despite the excitement, memories of his dreadful battle with Nightmare made Sunny shiver. Shadow attributes: Swift, Dark Destrier, Dreadlord, Dreamwalker. The attributes were the same as before. His steed was swift, could travel through dreams, and grew stronger when feared or surrounded by shadows. Sunny's gaze finally settled on the string of runes that interested him the most. Shadow abilities: Flowing Shadow, Mantle of Fear, Nightmare, Dream Curse. His eyes widened slightly. The first two abilities had not changed. Flowing Shadow allowed Nightmare to move through shadows with stunning speed, as well as become one of them. Mantle of Fear was a powerful mental attack that induced terror in those affected by it. The second two abilities, though, the runes describing them were different. It happened faster than I thought. The Nightmare ability shared its name with the Black Stallion. At this moment its description read: Nightmare ability description. This shadow can create and subjugate nightmares. The more nightmares serve it, the more powerful it grows, both inside and outside dreams. Dormant nightmares 287. Awakened nightmares 252. Ascended nightmares 455. Transcendent nightmares 6. Sunny's eyes glinted darkly. It's 1,000. Not only had Nightmare subjugated enough dreadful dreams to unlock his terror ability, but due to the nature of the carriers of the Nightmare spell, most of these dreams were also much more powerful than expected, to the point where his rise in rank did not make them obsolete. The Black Stallion had even managed to find and defeat 6 nightmares belonging to saints, or maybe corrupted abominations. Each and every one of the subjugated nightmares added a little to his power, just like absorbing shadow fragments did. Much more importantly, the last few runes, which had been lightless before, were finally glowing with ethereal light. After accumulating an army of 1,000 nightmares, his shadow was finally a true terror once again. Trying to calm his wildly beating heart, Sunny concentrated on the newly awakened runes and read the description. Dream Curse, Ability Description. This shadow is a master of a lesser dream domain. It is capable of lulling living beings to sleep and imprisoning their souls in a labyrinth of nightmares. The souls destroyed within the nightmare maze feed the shadow. The more powerful the shadow grows, the faster and further the dream curse spreads. Sunny stared at the runes, suddenly chilled to the bone. How curious! He was shaken so much that he uttered those words aloud. Curious? What are you referring to, Lord Sunless? Did your horse not like the food? It smashed it with a hoof. I'm sorry to say this, my lord, but you might not know what beasts like to eat. That was a shell ornament after all. Who would want to eat a piece of shell? You should try fish next time. Sunny lingered for a moment, then turned his head and stared at Kronos wordlessly. The old man trembled. Right, he's still here. Leaving the soul sea, he concentrated fully on the real world and said evenly, I was referring to how similar an ability of my steed is to some other things. He did like the food. It was much more preferable than fish. Kronos looked at him with doubt, but Sunny ignored the youth and turned away. Maze of Nightmares. It was truly an insidious and dreadful ability, one worthy of a terror. Sunny could easily imagine the dream curse slowly spreading to swallow this entire city, people falling asleep one after another, until there was no one left awake. All of them dying, their souls devoured by the hungry shadow. He could also imagine the horror of their death. Sunny had experienced the dream maze himself, after all. What would have happened if he had broken down and given up? His soul would have been torn apart by the torment of endless nightmares, and his body would have turned into a hollow husk. The most frightening part of it all was the measure of control Nightmare had over the dream labyrinth, and the fact that the more his victims were terrified by it, the stronger he would be. There was a limit to the power of the dream curse, of course. After all, Sunny had broken free of it by destroying each and every one of the dreadful dreams. It had not spread to all the Kingdom of Hope, either, because its reach was limited by Nightmare's own strength. As an awakened terror, the dreadful steed could only influence one castle and its surroundings. As an ascended terror, though, that reach would have become greater. Who knew how far the dream curse would be able to spread in the future? But all of that was not why Sunny felt cold. Why would he? The power of his shadow was his own power. Rather, he was shaken by the words the spell used to describe the dream curse. A lesser dream domain. Didn't it sound like something he had encountered before? For example, the dreamscape, a vast illusion maintained by the aspect of a certain saint, where countless people could combat each other without the risk of injury. Awakened used the public arenas for training, but there were private ones established for the government forces and the legacy clans as well. There was even a version for mundane humans to enjoy. Was Dreamscape a type of lesser dream domain as well? That would certainly make sense. There was another similar example, though. Sunny trembled. There was the spell and its nightmares. There was the dream realm itself. If there were lesser dream domains, there had to be greater ones, too, as well as those above them. If so, the souls destroyed within his shadow's dream maze were consumed, making the shadow stronger. What happened to the souls of those who died within nightmares, of those who died in the dream realm, of those infected by the spell? Was the spell feeding on the souls of everyone who carried it, and on the souls of everything those who carried it killed? The thought was terrifying, but still, it would make sense. Sunny lowered his gaze and stared at the fabric of Anank's mantle. When an awakened conjured a memory, The memory was manifested from their soul essence. What were the worlds within nightmares manifested from? He turned his head and observed fallen grace. Finally, his gaze settled on Kronos. And when the nightmare was over, where did all the souls conjured into it by the spell go? Sunny had never seriously considered how the spell operated, simply because it was so powerful as to seem omnipotent. If one assumed something to be omnipotent, they would not question how it worked, simply because its workings were beyond the realms of logic and reason. However, now, for the first time, he was starting to question if the spell was truly free from the laws that govern the rest of mundane things. Perhaps its scale was just so great that mere mortals like him were not capable of perceiving it. Or maybe he was wrong, and there was nothing in common between the principles of the dream curse and the spell. In any case, instead of thinking about things that are beyond my understanding, I should concentrate on what is in front of me, my ascended terror of a steed, and the curse he commands. It will surely be of help in this cursed tomb, especially since there's a mad bastard around who is fond of visiting other people's dreams. Not long after the Black Stallion's ascension, the day of their departure arrived. The weeks they had spent in fallen grace flew by fast. So fast, in fact, that Sunny was sad that they had felt so short. It was nice, spending time with Nephi's and Cassie again. Back in the waking world, there had always been invisible walls between them. The great clans, the war, the complicated feelings of the past, the dark promises of the future. But nightmares had a way of simplifying things. All of these matters had been made small and insignificant by the dire necessity to conquer the seed, and so Sunny found himself enjoying the feeling of closeness he had not felt in a long time. It was funny, really. Ever since becoming a sleeper, he had been told over and over again how dreadful and deadly third nightmares were. And there was truth to these rumors, of course. After all, Sunny had already been forced to battle a damned great beast to survive here. But strangely, most of his time in the tomb of Ariel had been rather peaceful. He had a feeling that peaceful days would become a thing of the past very soon, though. From today onward, theirs was a straight path. First to the dangerous waters where Effie and Jet were marooned. Then to the mysterious city of Twilight to find Kai and Mordred. And finally to Verge, the throne of the defilement, to burn it down and conquer the nightmare. Of course, the chain breaker was going to return to fallen grace between each step to resupply, receive repairs, and give its crew an opportunity to recover. But those stops would be brief and far between. For the remainder of the nightmare, Sunny and his companions would be going from one dire battle to another. Looking at the dreamlike view of the last city of the river people from the height of the temple's tower, Sunny sighed and looked at Cassie and Nephi's. The suns had just risen, and the whole world was drowned in countless shades of red. Illuminated by the crimson blaze, both of them looked solemn and ready. He lingered for a moment, then asked, "Is it time?" Cassie nodded slowly. "It's time, let's go." Together, they descended from the tower, passed the grand hall of the temple, and walked outside. The blind girl's guards were following them from behind, just like always. But today, many more people had come to bid their Sibyl farewell. Soldiers, artisans, and citizens of all kinds. Thousands of gaunt old men and women were crowding the streets, looking at the beautiful young woman with golden shackles wrapped around her wrists. Their frail figures and wrinkly faces were like a sea. Their eyes. Sunny did not know how to describe the emotion that shone in them. Was it pride, sorrow, fear, love, guilt? Or all of it fused together? Human beings were not that simple after all. They rarely felt only one thing. Most of the time, their hearts were an irrational and contradictory mess of clashing and conflicting emotions. Will we manage to save these people, or are they all doomed? Sunny knew that this was not the real fallen grace. And yet, He also knew that the shadows of living beings he killed in the nightmares were still within his soul, indistinguishable from the shadows that belonged to the inhabitants of both the dream realm and the waking world. So what exactly was the difference? They passed through the crowded streets and approached the piers. The chain breaker rested on the water, freshly repaired and refurbished. Its tattered sails were replaced by new ones, each of a gorgeous, vibrant scarlet color. There wasn't much ceremony. Sonny, Cassie, and Nephi's climbed aboard. The two deaf guards remained on the pier. But before they left, Cassie turned to the crowd of elderly Riverborn and smiled. Her smile was like a ray of pure sunlight in this land of eternal dusk. "My people." Her voice echoed above the water, reaching far and wide. The inhabitants of fallen grace, the last humans in the tomb of Ariel, listened with rapt attention, catching every word. Sonny gazed at the crowd and soon noticed a familiar figure. Kronos was also here, looking at the graceful ship with awe and longing. Cassie waited for a moment, then continued. "I have to apologize. Usually I would have taken you all to the House of Parting to celebrate and enjoy a delicious feast. Sadly, the lower house is no more, and so I have no food to offer." A wave of murmurs rose from the crowd as many people chuckled. Someone yelled, "It's all right, my lady. Feed us when you return." The blind girl remained motionless for a few moments. Still, today is not a day for sadness. It is a day for celebration. This journey I am leaving on is not my last. Instead, it is the beginning of a new era, a better era, an era of grace and freedom. She raised her hands and pulled them apart, easily breaking the golden chain. The shattered links fell into the water. Cassie smiled again. "Lady Changing Star, Lord Sunless, and I, we are leaving to gather powerful outsiders and vanquish the defilement once and for all. Our victory is assured. I know." It would have been an empty proclamation if anyone else had said it. However, for the people of fallen grace, Cassie was Dusk, the last Sibyl, the oracle who had guided their people for many generations, and who knew the secrets of both the past and the future. Hearing her, they stared with wide eyes. In the next moment, a joyous roar rose from the crowd. "Our Lady knows. She saw it. Victory, our victory is assured." Staring at the celebrating old men, their sorrow gone, Sonny leaned slightly and asked in a whisper, Did you receive a vision of fate?" Cassie froze, then shuddered slightly. A moment later, she turned to him, her smile turning brittle. Her beautiful blue eyes were shining, with the reflection of the crimson sky. She lingered for a bit, then answered, "Who cares about fate? If fate is against us, we'll break it." Sonny stared at her, befuddled. The corner of his mouth twitched. "Do you think it's easy to break fate?" The blind girl lowered her head slightly and turned back to the crowd. Her quiet answer was almost drowned out by the joyous cries. "No, it's not easy. It's not easy at all." Soon, the sails of the chain breaker were filled with wind. The graceful vessel moved slowly, leaving the voices of the crowd behind. The people of fallen grace watched as it sailed away, waving and wishing their lady good fortune in the days to come. But then they disappeared from view, obscured by the crimson haze. There was nothing but a vast expanse of water left in front of them. The first of the many battles was approaching. Their first goal was to find Jet and Effie. Cassie had been able to determine the general area where they were marooned, but not why. She was also not sure what dangers awaited the chain breaker in that hazardous region of the great river. However, she did have a lead. The problem was that this lead was buried in one of the lost temples of fallen grace, the palace where a defiled Sibyl had once been entombed alive. During the battle for the city, the temple had been unsealed, and the island ships that could not be saved were abandoned. Cut free, they had been left to the currents. The rest of the flotilla fled upstream, where it remained to this day. Nevertheless, the chain breaker was moving into the past once more, searching for the lost districts. Sunny, Nephi's, and Cassie were going to find the lost temple, slay the defiled Sibyl, if the creature was still dwelling there, and sift through the temple's library in search of information about the place Effie and Jet were trapped in. Breathing heavily, Sunny leaned on the side of the ketch and cursed quietly. The ketch had been patched up and repaired as well. With its masts dismantled and stored, it resembled a proper lifeboat. The craftsmen of fallen grace had also constructed an actual nest for it, with ropes and pulleys to lower the ketch into the water and hoist it back up again when needed. Nephi's was at the stern, controlling the ship, while Cassie was examining the damaged essence lines of the ancient vessel nearby. Looking at her, he decided to rest for a few minutes and asked somberly, "Why wasn't that Sibyl killed after succumbing to the defilement anyway? Simply sealing the temple does not seem like a reliable solution, especially since it seems to have been done in a hurry, with all the valuables remaining inside. Who just goes and loses an entire library?" The blind girl was distracted from her thoughts and turned to him, her golden hair fluttering in the wind. She lingered for a moment, then shrugged. "I'm not really sure. It happened long before we entered the nightmare, so perhaps the people of fallen grace simply couldn't bring themselves to kill one of their Sibyls. You saw how conflicted they are about us. Perhaps sealing her inside and turning the temple into a mausoleum was simply safer." She sighed and shook her head. "I agree, though. It was a mistake. When I entered the nightmare, we could have preserved the entire city if not for their misguided ways. There were 2 Sibyls left in fallen grace back then, and one of them had just succumbed to the defilement. She was still new to her unholy powers, though. The battle was dreadful, but we could have won." Her face turned dull. It was not until the seal of the old temple came undone that disaster struck. Once that thing got out, there was no stopping it. Sunny raised an eyebrow with a dubious expression. "And yet you want us to seek her out." Cassie sighed, then smiled lightly. "Well, I alone was not enough to both battle the creature and prevent the city from sinking. But the 3 of us together, that is a completely different story. I don't think we'll have too much of a problem dealing with her. If we do fail to take down a single defiled, there's no point in even trying to conquer the nightmare, don't you think?" Sunny smiled crookedly. "I guess." There was another reason why they wanted to slay the defiled Sibyl, as well. The conflict of the nightmare seemed to be connected to the fate of fallen grace and of the river people civilization as a whole. The natural ending of this story was complete extinction, which was why Sunny and Nephi's were determined to destroy Verge and save the last human city instead. But simply eliminating the source of the defilement was not enough. Right now, the people of fallen grace were doomed, for no other reason than that they were all too old and weak to have children. To ensure that a new generation of the river people could be born, the city had to return to its previous position downstream, which was impossible because of the lingering presence of the defiled Sibyl. So the creature had to go. Sunny looked at the crimson sky, then asked, "How does it work anyway? Why was the entombed Sibyl so much more powerful than the one you killed?" Cassie remained silent for a bit before answering. "Simple, really. All the nightmare creatures we met before entering the tomb had been corrupted countless years ago. There was barely a trace of their previous selves left. Corruption is a gradual process, as it turns out. The Sibyl I killed had not been an abomination for more than a week. She was still mostly human. The other, though, had spent a long time sealed in that temple. The thing that broke free from it could barely be called a human. Its powers were greater, and it was much more used to them as well." Sunny sighed. It made sense. With his curiosity satisfied, he decided that it was time to get back to the arduous practice. He was trying to master the sorcery of names. Sadly, Sunny was making zero progress. Learning the names themselves was not too hard, at least not the simple ones Nephis had done her best to teach him. Even though those names were eerily odd, barely fitting into his mind and constantly fading from his memory, he possessed enough mental discipline to hold on to the knowledge of them. The problem was actually trying to speak them. In that regard, Sonny was failing miserably. It was as Anik had said, people needed an innate talent to master the words, and it seemed that he severely lacked it. Curse it! Perhaps Sonny was being greedy by wishing to learn an entire new system of sorcery, but he still wanted to master the fundamentals of shaping. Today, his attempts to summon the wind were going even worse than usual. He was tired and drained, but there was no result whatsoever. Damned wind, come on, blow. When Sonny's irritation reached a boiling point, Cassie suddenly straightened and turned her head slightly. There was a frown on her face. Something is wrong. Sonny sighed heavily, then subtly studied the world through his shadows. There was no danger around them. Everything seemed fine. That said, his intuition was indeed telling him something. It was not exactly ringing an alarm, but there was an eerie sensation at the back of his mind. He rose to his feet and studied the great river with his own two eyes. After a few moments, Sonny asked, "What is it? I don't see anything." Cassie did not move, her frown deepening. The waves rustled as they brushed against the hull of the ship. The sails rippled in the wind. Raising a hand, she touched her cheek briefly, then said somberly, "I feel strange, as if I'm drunk." Sonny stared at her wordlessly. "Huh." The blind girl grimaced. "It's like I'm seeing double. Only, of course, it's not my sight that is blurry. Rather, it's my aspect ability, the one that allows me to sense what will happen a few seconds into the future." He remained silent for a few moments. The shadows across the chain breaker moved, stirring. "So, what you're saying is that something is wrong with the future?" Cassie hesitated a little. "Or at least with my ability to perceive the future." That was a rather terrifying thing to hear. Sonny looked around once more, noting how peaceful their surroundings looked. The sky was burning beautifully with countless shades of red, with not a cloud in sight. The surface of the flowing river was spotless, with nothing hiding beneath it. And yet, there was something sinister happening to the world, unseen and imperceptible. If not for the keen senses of the oracle, none of them would have known that something was wrong. "Let's go." Taking Cassie by the wrist, Sonny guided her to the stern of the ship, where Nephis was holding the steering oar. He had not had to guide the blind girl in a long, long time, but now that her aspect ability was compromised, she must have been disoriented. Even if she was looking at the world through his eyes, that was not the same as perceiving it with her own senses. What the hell is happening in this damned tomb? Soon they arrived at the runic circle and told Nephis the news. She remained silent for a while, looking forward with a somber expression. After a while, Neph nodded. "I see, I felt that something was wrong too." Sonny tilted his head a little. "How?" Even his faint premonition had only appeared because of his tenuous affinity to fate, which had been enhanced by Weaver's lineage. Sonny usually called these vague feelings his intuition, but it was not exactly a sixth sense. It was actually a rudimentary ability to feel the tremors of the strings of fate. What allowed Nephis to feel the wrongness, then? She pointed to the sky. "It's the suns. I am responsible for steering the ship, so I keep an eye on them for navigation. There's something strange happening, though. For the last hour or so, our course has been changing slightly. It's like we are being pulled towards something. But if we are, I don't know how. I don't think there are any forces exerting pressure on the ship or the current." Sonny suddenly had a very, very bad premonition. His face turned grim. They were on a hunt for a defiled Sibyl, and Cassie's perception of the future was suddenly behaving strangely. More than that, the world itself was not working quite as it was supposed to. "No, no, it can't be, can it?" Glancing at the blind girl, he asked evenly, "Say, Cassie, that thing that broke free when the temple was unsealed, what exactly were her powers?" Cassie hesitated for a moment. "I am not sure. I did not get a proper look at her. All I remember is that all the soldiers I sent to stall her were torn to shreds in an instant, unable to land a single blow on her hide. Arrows and magic projectiles missed, enchantments failed. She was too dreadful of a creature for us to handle, especially while fighting the other Sibyl." Her beautiful blue eyes glistened. "As soon as the second Sibyl died, I ordered everyone to retreat and disconnect the entire section of the city where the creature was raging. That was how we lost half of Fallen Grace." Sunny inhaled deeply. "But all the Sibyls had powers related to revelations, right? And revelations are a manifestation of extreme affinity to fate. That Sibyl was capable of sensing the future before becoming corrupted." He gritted his teeth and shared a wild suspicion that was making him incredibly wary. "So, is it possible that the abomination is now capable of affecting the future?" Nephi's looked at him strangely. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "Let's say there's an ancient Sibyl, a transcendent outsider who comes from the time before the Doom War. She becomes defiled and turns into a nightmare creature, then gets buried alive for countless years. In the end, she breaks free of her mausoleum and devours half a city's worth of human souls." Sonny shook his head. "And then we three go searching for her. And just at that moment, Cassie's ability to perceive the future starts behaving weirdly, while our ship is inexplicably moving in a direction that it's not supposed to be moving. Wouldn't you say that it's quite possible that this primordial horror of a defiled abomination is more than likely to possess powers that have to do with affecting the flow of time, or at least the probability of things happening?" Cassie and Nephi's paled a little. After a while, the blind girl asked, That sounds too fantastical to be true. A power to change probability. Even if she is a tremendously powerful corrupted abomination of unknown class, that's a bit too much, don't you think?" Sunny shrugged. "No, I don't. Too fantastical. We are inside a huge pyramid, sailing on an endless river that flows through time, suspended in the middle of a bottomless abyss. Oh, and it's all made from the corpse of an unholy titan. I don't think that there can even be something too fantastical anymore." He grimaced, then added in a stifled tone, "As for how unimaginable a power that affects probability would be, aren't you forgetting something? I've been suffering from a similar kind of thing since before I became a sleeper. Only, in my case, it's not me who is affecting probability. Rather, improbable things have a way of pulling me toward them. In any case, the result is the same." The three of them remained silent for a few moments. Then, Nephi said calmly, "So what?" Sunny blinked. "So what? You are not wary of an enemy who can literally change the future as they see fit." She leaned back, then shrugged with indifference. "There are obviously some limits to that power, if you're even right about its nature. Otherwise, we would have died from heart attacks or been hit by stray lightning already. Why don't we just go and kill that Sibyl anyway? Do I need to remind you too that we also have the power to change the future?" Sunny and Cassie were confused. The blind girl tilted her head a little and asked, "And we do?" Nephi's nodded. "Of course, if we go there and kill the abomination, that will be the future. We would have made it. Every action performed by every person in the world changes the future. That power is really not that unique. In fact, it's pretty universal." He stared at her for a moment, then chuckled wryly. "It's hard to argue. The power to change the future, huh? All right. Let's go and make a future where the abomination is dead and we're alive. It's not like we know how to escape anyway. The chain breaker was sailing across the blood-red expanse of flowing water. Under the blazing crimson sky, no mystical force seemed to be influencing it. And yet, its course was being set by someone other than the person holding the steering oar. The ship was being pulled toward the lost temple of fallen grace. On its deck, 3 masters were preparing for battle. Sonny was stretching, his expression calm and focused. Not that Cassie and Nephis could see it, he had summoned Weaver's mask a long time ago. In the battle against a corrupted oracle, it was both his best weapon and shield. Cassie had summoned her armor and half-mask. The quiet dancer and a long dagger were resting in twin scabbards on her hips. Nephis was still wearing her white tunic, but there was a beautiful longsword in her hands now. Its hilt was black, with the symbol of a scarlet anvil being pierced by a sword etched into the pommel. How do we even fight an enemy who can influence the future? After Sonny asked the question, both he and Nephis turned to Cassie. The blind girl frowned slightly. How should I know? Who else would know but her? Sonny hesitated for a few moments, then said awkwardly, wouldn't a person who can perceive the future know how to kill one of her kind best? The blind girl shifted, then turned to face him. After a short pause, she smiled faintly and asked, what, haven't you thought about how to kill someone like me before? A lot. He coughed. It never crossed my mind. Hearing him, Cassie laughed. It's like Nephis said, her power has to have a limit. Say she can alter the path of 1 arrow, then hit her with 2. If she can alter the path of 100 arrows, hit her with 101. Sonny nodded. Indeed, this was the method he had come up with when pondering how to deal with Cassie, purely out of academic curiosity, of course. Since she could perceive a few seconds into the future, the only way to defeat her was to either exhaust her essence or create a future that was inescapable. Then, knowing it would be of no help. The same principle worked against someone with the power to alter the future, in theory. Assuming that the defiled Sybil could raise the probability of certain events happening, the key to defeating her would be creating a situation where all possible outcomes led to her death. He sighed. So the brute force approach, I hate it. Nephis stared at him incredulously. Meaning that you like it? Sonny shook his head earnestly. No. She hesitated for a few moments, then let out a quiet sigh. This mask is confusing. Was it? Sonny did not think that it was that confusing. All it did was reverse his flaw, making it so that he could only tell lies. As it turned out, always lying was much more liberating than always telling the truth. That was because there were countless lies, but only one truth. That said, he wouldn't want to live while always wearing Weaver's mask. Lies might be liberating, but he did not think that a person who only deceived could be a part of a community, at least not in any kind of meaningful way. And no one survived in the dream realm alone, but much more importantly, being cursed to always tell the truth had landed him in hot water more than once, but looking back at his life up until now, Sonny clearly saw how it had benefited him, as well. Without the flaw, he would have continued to lie and deceive, remaining isolated and untrusting. The mindset that had saved his life countless times in the outskirts would have become the end of him in the perilous world of the spell. He would not have grown close to anyone and would not have made precious friends. And that, most likely, would have led to him dying in some ditch, miserable and alone. Sonny still had plenty of chances to die in a ditch, but at least his death was not going to be quite as bitter. That's personal growth right there. Chuckling under his breath, he looked at the crimson sky. Perhaps Anik had been right. Only flawed things had a reason to improve, and thus, being flawed was the greatest source of growth. What did it mean for the gods and the demons, then? Did the gods, who had been born flawless, create the universal law of imperfection to fuel their own rise to power? If so, which god was it that had created such a cunning thing? Sonny remained motionless for a while, then sighed and shook his head. Who cared about these things? The gods were dead anyway, and he was going to be dead too if the three of them failed to kill the defiled Sibyl. I don't see anything. Nephi's raised an eyebrow, then suddenly tensed. Meaning you do see something. She turned and peered at the horizon. There, a dark shape was slowly appearing from the scarlet glow. A crooked temple was rising from the water, most of it hidden from view and drowned. Its walls, once white and beautiful, were covered by cracks and overgrown with moss. Dark vines were crawling up the broken facade like a burial shroud, blooming with beautiful black flowers. The artificial island the temple had once stood upon was broken and partially submerged. What little of it remained above the waves was like a wild garden, its dark expanse brimming with thorns. The sky itself seemed to dim as the chain breaker drew closer to the drifting derelict. The eerie sensation at the back of Sonny's mind grew stronger. Just relax, I'm sure there's nothing to worry about. He threw a grim look at the sin of solace, then commanded the manifested shadows to lower the sails. At the same time, his own shadows moved, gliding across the deck toward their master. Cassie unsheathed her rapier and dagger. Nephi's silently raised her sword and rested its blade against her shoulder. She remained silent for a while, then suddenly let out a long sigh and covered her face with a palm. Sonny gave her a glance. Huh. Wait, don't tell me that you're actually worried. Neph avoided looking at him, lingered for a bit and shook her head. No, I'm just realizing the meaning of everything Lord Mongrel said. Her voice sounded strangely aggrieved. Was Sonny seeing things, or had her cheeks become slightly pink? He stared for a bit, then coughed awkwardly. Well, I meant every single word. With that, he headed to the bow of the chain breaker. Soon, the ship slowed down. Reaching the drowning island, it scraped gently against its surface and came to a halt. Just like before, everything seemed calm. There was no movement in the wild garden of black flowers, and no abominations lunging at them from inside the temple. The breached walls stood precariously, gaping with ominous darkness. It was as if something was inviting them to come inside. Summoning his cursed sword, Sonny grimaced and jumped down onto the sinister shore. Since we're invited, let's not make the host wait too long. A moment later, Cassie and Nephi's landed behind him. The water splashed quietly as it licked the shore of the drowned island, the black vines glistening with crimson luster in the blaze of dusk. Apart from that gentle sound and the whispers of the wind, the dark garden was silent. Sonny lingered for a few moments, extending his shadow sense outward. Eventually, he shook his head and said warily, "There's movement," which meant that there was none. The dark vines also did not seem to exude poisonous mist, and neither were their black flowers full of parasitic pollen. As far as Sonny could tell, the Garden of Thorns was entirely safe. They were not taking any chances, though. Taking a step forward, Nephi silently raised a hand. Wisps of white flame rose from her skin, and then suddenly shot forward in a rain of incandescent drops. As her eyes shone with incinerating radiance, the white drops fell on the vines and suddenly exploded into a roaring blaze. Nephi stared at the dark garden with grim determination, and following her will, the flames spread with astonishing speed. Soon, the entire place was engulfed in fire. It crawled up the walls of the crooked temple, turning the magnificent edifice into a towering pyre. Soon, the three of them found themselves standing in front of a sea of flames. The black flowers dissolved into the white inferno. The slithering vines were obliterated from existence. The ancient stones cracked and melted, revealing more of the dark interior of the lost temple. Still, no abomination revealed itself from the depths of the burning garden. Nephi's let out a long sigh and closed her eyes for a moment. The furious radiance illuminating them from within dimmed, and then disappeared to reveal her pale complexion. At the same time, the raging flames were left without the will that had been pushing them forward. With no more fuel to burn, they grew smaller and were gradually extinguished. The black garden had been turned into cinders and ash, while the walls of the drowned temple were cracked and blackened by soot. The path was clear. Sunny had expected an ambush to spring until the last moment, but it seemed that there was indeed no danger here, at least on the surface. What waited in the depths of the temple, though? No one could tell. He considered sending his shadows underground to explore, but decided against it. The more powerful enemies he faced, the more of them possessed means of sensing and harming intangible beings. The shadows were no different from parts of his soul, but lacked the protection of his ascended body. So, keeping them close when dealing with a powerful opponent was a wiser choice. "Let's go." Shielding her face from the heat, Cassie took a hesitant step forward. Sunny observed her for a moment, then followed. Catching up to the blind girl, he asked, "How are you feeling?" She held tighter to the hilt of the quiet dancer and forced out a smile. "Better. It's just that I sense varied futures instead of a definite one here. It was disorienting at first, but not too difficult to get used to. I am long accustomed to perceiving the world from multiple points of view, after all. Still, I think I am going to have a huge headache when we're done." He nodded slowly. Sunny was no stranger to looking upon the world from several points of view. That was a natural state for him, considering the growing number of shadows he possessed. However, perceiving several seconds into not one, but a multitude of varied futures had to be terribly confusing. He had always struggled to understand how it was exactly that Cassie managed to handle the mental strain of perceiving two different moments simultaneously, especially to such a degree that it aided her in combat instead of becoming a hindrance. Not to mention that she remained blind in both of these different moments of time. Humans were supremely adaptable creatures, but everything had a limit. Maybe it was because Sunny had been slow to realize how abnormal his own talents were that he rarely considered how exceptional his companions were, as well. Cassie was usually quiet and unassuming, so it was easy to overlook her inconspicuous but exceptional mental prowess. In truth, it was rather astounding. Sunny glanced at the blind girl again and frowned slightly. "It's all right for everyone else to overlook her, but why do I always make the same mistake? I should really know better." Perhaps it was because, deep inside, he still saw Cassie as the helpless girl that had desperately needed his assistance on the forgotten shore. Both of them had changed drastically since then, but that first impression was so deeply ingrained that erasing it was simply too difficult. If so, Sunny wondered what image of him was ingrained deep inside Cassie's heart. However, he only allowed his thoughts to wander for a brief moment. They were in the enemy territory, after all. It was no time for idle thoughts. Do you even have to ask the question? The image of a deceitful, selfish scumbag who outright told Nephi's that she was a fool for dragging dead weight around, and that it would be better for the two of you to leave the useless blind girl for dead. Oh, what? You think that Cassie really did not hear that conversation? Sunny threw a hateful glance at the Sin of Solace, who was walking a step behind with a contemptuous grin on his face. Did Cassie's shoulders tremble a little at the sound of the sword wraith's voice? He wasn't sure. Sunny hesitated for a moment but remained silent in the end. He didn't really want to answer and didn't really know what to say. There had indeed been a conversation like that, soon after their first meeting on the forgotten shore. The blind girl had been fast asleep back then, though most likely. She had never indicated otherwise. "Stop." At the sound of Cassie's voice, Sunny tensed up. What is it? Had she really heard the Sin of Solace? The blind girl remained motionless for a moment, then took a step forward and leaned down. Her hand disappeared into the ash and pulled out the singed remains of a crude spear from beneath it. Her face turned somber. Dropping the spear back to the ground, she sighed and said darkly, "It's the drowned. The word hung in the air, both ominous and strangely familiar. Sonny frowned and studied the remains of the crude weapon. Finally, he asked, "The drowned. We have never met abominations like that." Which of course meant that they had. Nephis nodded. Yes, a group of them attacked the chain breaker once, drowned outcasts. That was what the spell called them. They weren't too powerful, apart from the depth dweller that arrived with them. Cassie shook her head somberly. The outcasts are the dregs of their kind. Most drowned are much more dangerous. They are a special tribe of nightmare creatures here in Ariel's tomb. No one really knows where they come from, but many believe that the drowned were humans once. They hunt in groups and herd true horrors of the depths to use as war beasts. Most troublesome of all of them possess at least a rudimentary level of sentience. They follow strange rituals, too. Nephis frowned. I'm sure we will manage. Unless there are titans or great ones among them, the three of us should be enough to deal with these drowned. The blind girl remained silent for a few moments. That is true. Although the trace of the drowned is bad news, they're nothing we can't handle. I am concerned about what their presence here represents, though. She turned to face the ruined temple and gritted her teeth. These abominations are very territorial. They constantly battle with other nightmare creatures and leave signs to avoid the waters where truly powerful foes dwell. The fact that the drowned are here, on the island, means that they have accepted the Sibyl as their ruler. Cassie paused, then added with a dark expression, which means that she has become a tyrant at least. Only those have enough authority to make the drowned submit to them. Sonny let out a sigh. So a corrupted tyrant then. He had faced more powerful nightmare creatures, but only a handful. While a corrupted tyrant was not beyond their ability to slay, it was certainly not an easy foe to face, especially on the creature's terms. His voice sounded glum. How did she become a tyrant anyway? Wasn't she a corrupted beast first? Then again, Dusk of Fallen Grace had met him as a terror. It was obvious that nightmare creatures could reach a greater class than what they had started from, just like Saint could. That was a trait that all noble creatures, those that succumbed to corruption, and those who did not, shared. And it seemed that corrupted humans shared that ability as well, not unlike how he, Nephis, and Mordred did. Cassie shrugged. She was defiled a long time ago. She also fed on the powerful warriors of fallen grace, and gods know what else since then. In any case, she won't be waiting for us alone. We must be prepared to fight her entourage as well. Sonny smiled behind his mask. Too bad we don't have an entourage of our own. As he said those words, two menacing figures stepped out from the shadows to stand by his side. One was a graceful knight in a suit of intricate onyx armor. The other was an infernal fiend forged out of black steel and broken blades. A terrifying black steed rose from the ground behind them, crimson light reflecting from his adamantine horns and wolf-like fangs. Cassie let out a quiet sigh, then summoned her echoes as well. A whirlwind of white sparks formed into two humanoid figures. One was a woman wearing a red dress, not unlike the one the blind girl wore, her face hidden by a veil. Sonny suddenly felt a chill run down his spine as he looked at the silent figure. Why did it seem like there was something entirely inhuman hiding beneath the flowing red fabric? When the echo of the defiled Sibyl moved, it was eerily too smooth, as though she was hovering above the ground or slithering like an eel instead of taking steps. He thought he saw a glimpse of a glistening black tentacle appearing for a split second from beneath the hem of her crimson skirt. The most unnerving part, however, was her empty gaze. Sonny had never felt comfortable around human echoes, and he did not feel comfortable around an echo of a former human either. Cassie's second echo was less disturbing, but just as curious. It was a tall steel mannequin with 4 arms, each holding a sharp blade. The artificial echo, an ascended monster, looked like a clockwork man. His movements were somewhat awkward, but possessed the distinctive sharpness of a trained fighter. Sonny was reminded of something when looking at the mannequin as well. The creature was vaguely similar in appearance to the steel mount that Morgan rode sometimes. So, that echo must have been created by the enchanters of valor, too. I wonder how they do it. The complexity must be on an entirely different level. He was distracted from his thoughts by a disdainful grunt. Turning his head, Sonny glanced at Fiend with surprise. The steel ogre was staring down the clockwork swordsman with an obvious air of superiority. Was the fool sticking his chest out? Under Sonny's dubious gaze, Fiend threw a furtive glance at Saint, and then stuck his chest out even further. His chin rose cockily. The taciturn knight, of course, remained utterly indifferent. Realizing that she was not impressed, the infernal ogre deflated a little. Then, he stared at the steel echo vindictively. His fiery eyes were burning with hunger. "Don't even think about it." Hearing Sonny's hiss, Fiend flinched and turned away from the clockwork swordsman with an innocent look, as if the thought of gobbling up Cassie's echo out of spite never crossed his gluttonous mind. "I can't believe it. This fool is really getting out of hand." Shaking his head, Sonny turned to Nephi's. She was the only one of them who didn't have anything to summon, of course. That was only because Changing Star had always given the echoes she earned away to someone else. Even now, 2 of Cassie's 3 had come from Neph. It was a bit sad, though, for her to look like an impoverished noble when compared to Sonny and Cassie. Feeling his gaze, Nephi shifted slightly and stared back. "What?" Sonny shook his head. "No, nothing." At that moment the sword wraith laughed. "Doesn't have anything to summon. Fool, why would she need to? She already has a mighty shadow following her around, ready to satisfy her every whim. That's you. You're her echo. So, in a way, Nephi's has 4 while Cassie has 3. You, on the other hand, don't even qualify to be compared to them." The Sin of Solace paused, then added with a smile. "Ah, don't forget that it was the blind traitor who turned you into an echo, to begin with." Sonny's face twitched. Cassie, meanwhile, scowled and started walking toward the temple. "Come on, we should finish her off before night comes." He gritted his teeth and followed, furious at the fact that the apparition's words had gotten to him. Approaching the breach in the wall of the crooked temple, the small but extremely powerful cohort of masters, shadows, and echoes dove into the sinister darkness. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story. And if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be surprise for all of you. Stay tuned.